Buddha teaches on practice by Venerable Rungruan Papasaro, Dr. Rungruan Lim Chu Patapa. In the Jula Hatthapado Sutta and Maha Asapura Sutta, the Buddha explained to follow the footprint of the Buddha like an elephant's footprint, starting with listening to the Dharma of the Buddha with noble moral discipline as a preparation guideline to abandon the destruction of life in day-to-day living, such as abandoning the taking of what is not given, abandoning sexual relations, abandoning false speech, abandoning malicious speech, abandoning harsh speech, abandoning idle chatter, and abstaining from injuring seeds and plants, abstaining from dancing, singing, music, and unsuitable shows, abstaining from wearing garlands, smartening himself with scent, and embellishing himself with unguents, abstaining from high and large couches, abstaining from accepting gold and silver, abstaining from accepting raw grain, abstaining from accepting raw meat, abstaining from accepting women and girls, abstaining from accepting men and women slaves, abstaining from accepting goats and sheep, abstaining from accepting fowl and pigs, abstaining from accepting elephants, cattle, horses, and marais, abstaining from accepting fields and land, abstaining from going on errands and running messages, abstaining from buying and selling, abstaining from false weights, false metals, and false measures, abstaining from accepting bribes, deceiving, defrauding, and trickery, abstaining from wounding, murdering, binding, and brigandage, plunder, and violence. He becomes content with robes to protect his body and with alms food to maintain his stomach, and wherever he goes, he sets out taking only these with him. While having noble moral discipline, he experiences within himself the bliss of blamelessness. The next step is to establish mindfulness before him with the noble restraint of the sense faculties by establishing mindfulness, and then having mindfulness to safeguard the mind from any arriving stimulus through the 6 sense bases to abstain the mind from sensual pleasures, and being secluded from unwholesome states. That is, by having sense faculty with mindfulness when seeing a form with the eye, when hearing a sound with the ear, when smelling an odor with the nose, when tasting a flavor with the tongue, when feeling a tactile object with the body, and when cognizing a mental phenomenon with the mind. He does not grasp at its signs and features. He practices the way of its restraint, he guards the sense faculty, he undertakes the restraint of the sense faculty with mindfulness, and he becomes one who acts with the noble mindfulness and clear comprehension in every bodily and mind activities. This technique later is developed to be Yoniso Manasikara, to have a noble restraint of the mind activities, of which in succession it is an application of mindfulness to safeguard the mind from any arriving stimulus coming inside through the 6 sense bases, and this is the way to safeguard the mind from unwholesome states. Also, this noble mindfulness in Yoniso Manasikara will make the mind to become internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. It should be noted that since the mindfulness is very important throughout the Buddhist practice, therefore we can partition this part of practice into 2 parts, that is, the mindfulness establishment and development, and the Yoniso Manasikara. Then by establishing mindfulness before him, he abandons the 5 lower fetters, namely abandoning longing for sensual pleasure of the world, abandoning ill will and hatred, abandoning dullness and drowsiness, abandoning restlessness and remorse, and abandoning doubt. The Buddha compared a person who is trapped into an individual unwholesome thoughts like a person who is in a debt, illness, a prison, slavery, and a road across a desert, and when being able to abandon all the 5 lower fetters as a person who is free from debt, recovery from illness, release from prison, freedom from slavery, and a land of safety. It should be noted that in order to abandon each type of lower fetter, a proper dharma is required, therefore we can partition this part of practice into 2 parts, that is, firstly performing mindfulness meditation to study a dharma, and then secondly applying the proper dharma to abandon a particular lower fetter one by one until all the 5 lower fetters are completely abandoned. Now after being able to abandon all the 5 lower fetters, and then the mind enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thought and examination, with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. And after the initial thought is abandoned by liberated thinking, and then the mind enters and dwells in the second jhana, which has internal confidence and unification of mind, is without thought and examination, and has rapture and happiness born of concentration. And after the fading away as well of rapture, he dwells in equanimity with mindfulness and clearly comprehending, he experiences happiness with the body, he enters and dwells in the third jhana, which is accompanied by equanimity with mindfulness, and becoming happy. And after abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and dejection, a monk enters upon and dwells in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. And at this time, the mind will become neither painful nor pleasant, which is a special condition of mind called the purification of mindfulness by equanimity. The mind becomes concentrated, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of defilements, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attain to imperturbability, and now we can perform an insight observation to see the insight as it really is, in order to gain wisdom for the destruction of all the taints. It should be noted that later the Buddha elaborated the part of knowledge development in details in an insight observation on the 4 mindfulness foundations, that is, by seeing the dependent series of the objects of consciousness in terms of the process of dependent origination, saying to have the knowledge of the manifold past lives. And by analyzing the cause and effect of what is happening, then gaining the knowledge of the passing away and rebirth of beings. This leads to the knowledge of the destruction of the taints, understanding as it actually is. This is taint. This is the origin of taint at craving, clinging, and ignorance of the process of dependent origination. This is the cessation of taint. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. After all the taints are destruct, and then the mind is liberated.